We are live, or at least we hope, because you never know what the Facebook and Instagram and other gods and gurus are going to do today. But we are finally here a little later than normal, but we made it. If my voice sounds a little weird today, bear with it, going through a little bit of the weather changes. But I'm not here to talk. I'm here to introduce somebody who's very special to me. Someone who I met, I want to say something like 15 years ago, maybe. And it's funny how the universe works because we connected, we had a connection, and then we lost touch. And then all of a sudden, it was like he kept coming up on Facebook. Thank you, Facebook. He also came up in other ways. And then I said, you know what? Let me just send him a note. So I did. And we immediately reconnected. And so today, you may have seen him on Leadership Live last Monday. Not this past, the one before, because yesterday was nothing. But I am going to introduce John Morris to you today, live from the UK. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Natalie. The sun is just setting. It is great that you were able to be here and to host this today. I know you've been feeling a little bit under the weather, and we've had all sorts of crazy stuff going on over here with the internet and I think globally. But we're here. We made it, which is phenomenal. So thank you very much for having me.
I know. Oh, absolutely. And I always love that I'm sparkling. Whenever I'm in this office, I'm sparkly. Or maybe it's just the energy, so I'm not sure. So, John, since we're talking about the internet and since we're talking about how weird the universe or how mysterious the universe sometimes is, what do you think about the power of the universe in general terms?
That's like asking, that's a big question. That's a very, very big question. For me, everything is divine. Everything is spirit. And what I suppose feel more than anything at this time right now is people are getting more and more away from any real spiritual connection. And it seems to be they're doing it en masse. And from my observations, I think when we get away from the core, when we get away from spirit, when we get away from our source, we're going into very uncharted territories and we're leaving a humongous and vital part of ourselves behind. You and I, obviously, I know we've talked a lot, with other people as well, but, our meeting is not by chance. You and I doing this show is not by chance. It all flowed, as I said on other podcasts this past week, that it all flowed because of decisions and things that had happened earlier on this year and these life-changing events and things, which again were all divine and were all, just amazing divine intervention, literally. So yeah. I think everything in the general sense is divine, it's spirit, it's energy, it's flow, whatever you want to call it. I don't mind because it doesn't affect me either way what you would call it or anybody else wants to call it, because I just don't hold on to those labels or anything these days. But I find that everything is divine in one form or another, and I feel that more and more people are getting away from that.
And it's funny that you say, it doesn't matter either way, and I'm paraphrasing, but it is so important that labels. Like I've been fighting. I feel like I've been Don Quixote for so long, fighting labels. So maybe that's one of the things that we have in common, because what are we using labels for? Who do they serve? It's really, really strange sometimes. So why do you not like labels?
For me, labels really restrict, I think, a person. They kind of box you in more than anything else. And I'll give you a prime example. For anyone that's watched shows that I've done previously, even on our network, we talk about when I was working with the church. And if you worked for a Church of Scotland, it was a very, fixed mindset that you were to have. If you were in the Catholic Church, it was the same thing. If you're in the Baptist Church, so on and so on. And what I found was, as I traveled around and I spoke to different people, more and more, it was like their labels defined them. And it's like in our world today, people seem to be defined by their gender, by their labels, by their sexual orientation. That's where they're now looking for their identity. which again, is bizarre to me because it's almost like you're looking outside of yourself for all the answers when all the answers are inside you. And I firmly believe that today, more and more people are suffering, and what they're suffering is their mind and their imagination more than anything. 150 years ago, it would never have been a question of your sexual identity, and I think that now we've got a race and population globally, if I can just express, I suppose, an opinion and a thought, that has so much time on their hands, and that there is so much content out there, some good, some very, very bad, if you go again under those labels, that really causes people to be conditioned one way or another. The sex culture, for example, now is so strong that people are getting so confused, and they're saying, well, I believe I'm this, I'm that, and the other. And then as I dig deeper with teenagers and with adults, and I ask them the questions, very, very not in a non-threatening way, and I would say, well, why do you believe you're that way? I'm curious, not judging, but I'm curious as to why. And it always, almost every single time, will come back to, well, I was watching this and they did it, and it seemed to fit who I was. So I know that was probably a very, very long answer for the question you're asking. But for me, with labels, what I found was when I shed all the labels this year, I don't define myself by a religious practice or a faith belief or anything like that. I simply am. I'm a divine spirit having a temporary human experience. And I've had the wonderful privilege this year of studying, Eastern philosophy and, all manner of different teachings from Christian to Hindu to, the Shaolin Temple in Germany and Buddhism, and now more so with the Native American spirituality in there, which I think is something that is a core that as a world that we need to be really listening to. And it's not all the peace pipe and and dancing around kind of thing. It's more of the respect for the world. It's more respect for our water and for our nation and our people. I could go on and on and on, but I think labels just really define people, and I think sometimes people are looking for that within them. They're looking for that definitive answer. And I suppose in some ways what I'm saying is when you box yourself in and you say that you are this way, that way, whatever, I think in some ways you actually limit yourself and lose who you truly are, if that makes sense. I believe Natalie may have frozen. I know she was having tremendous problems. There we go. She's back.
Okay, I am back, but apparently my video is frozen, but that's okay. It's your show anyhow, so it's all good. Here's a follow-up question to what you just said while I'm trying to figure out why my video is not working. So I agree with you that, and then this is going to be controversial, but I'm a revolutionary. So there seems to be a lot of time spent on arguing about labels and recreating labels.
I believe she's frozen again. We may be having problems with her internet. I may have to make up some questions just to fill in the time in case. It's always interesting when you're doing this live because you never ever know what's going to happen. And, especially with show hosts and things. So
there we go.
There we go. You're back.
Okay, you were gone on my end too. This is amazing. Well, John knows how to run a show. So what
I was just talking to the audience a little bit of background stuff while I was waiting for you to come back.
No, it's all good. And my video is still not working, so that's all fantastic. I'm going to switch out my camera in just a minute. But here's the question. What is, on the one hand, I understand that we need to argue about labels, right? But if we're now arguing about labels that didn't really mean anything. So, for example, ghost drivers, which in Germany has a very specific meaning. It means, you're driving in the wrong direction on a street. we're starting to argue about those.
Yeah.
And I wonder why that is. And I'm going to give you the screen while I'm switching out my camera.
It's an interesting question for sure. The first thing I suppose that comes to mind is, do we really need to argue about labels? The way that I look at it is, human beings seem to be able, they've got the amazing talent to be able to argue about anything. And I think whenever somebody's arguing for one way or the other, it's almost like the ego that's there that a lot of philosophers have talked about throughout the ages. Is your ego, and a lot of people call it edging out God. Wayne Dyer, I know, certainly coined that phrase that I knew the most. I think when people are starting to argue, I then ask the question behind it: what's the motives? And I get that for a mass people, they're arguing and they're fighting for their place in the world. I completely understand that. And again, it comes back to whenever somebody needs to argue and fight for their place in the world, it tells me very, very clearly that as a race, as a global race, we have really lost our way with how to be with each other. I firmly believe, and I write about this in my book that's sitting behind me, At the Battles We All Face, that I firmly believe we as a people were once all one. We traveled together. There's historical evidence to show that. And if you ever get the opportunity to Google what all the countries look like all together, it's beautiful. I mean, it's just this really wonderful, wonderful picture. But I believe that we were all once one, and that one day one wanted to go north and one wanted to go forward, one wanted to go left. And they split. They bid each other with peace, and then they went on their way. And that happened over and over and over again, until eventually you had, in like the 1100s, the 1000s, people that wanted to start to conquer lands, and people that wanted to start getting power. And they weren't happy with living together in harmony. They wanted to conquer. They wanted to dominate. And it showed me really clearly how people have really fallen and forgotten really the core and central truths about a lot of these things. And I think, like I said, people are fighting for their position and power and their place in the world now, because everybody wants to have a voice. Everyone wants to be heard. And I get it. I understand. But for me, I find when people start speaking with aggression, they start speaking with, authority, and they call themselves experts, and they call themselves all the labels under the sun. I listen to what the person is saying. I look deep into the person's eyes, and I feel the person's energy that they're giving off. And I can tell you everything that I need to know within those three things, as opposed to, somebody saying, well, I'm this and I'm that and I'm the other, because you have a lot of experts out there that call themselves experts and label themselves as experts that truly aren't. I don't know if that answers your question, but it was.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And at least, nothing works, but at least my face is back.
You're here.
And,
that's the thing.
And I agree with you. I think we live in a world where just about everybody's an expert in something. And to me, I know you study a lot. I know you've studied with, like you said, with the Native Americans, with Buddhists. You're now in a psychology program as well. So I know you're very well versed. And yet, to me, sometimes the most important experience and expertise comes from actually living it.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And so I know you work with youth. I know you work with artists. Because there is that other side to you, which is included, because we all have multiple sides, and that's the painting behind you, as well as the book. So author, coach, and artist, and we haven't even mentioned music yet. So when we're thinking about this, when you work with artists, for example, what are you working on with them? What are you trying to teach them, tell them? What skills are you trying to give them?
I think that the simple thing that I try to teach artists and all creative minds really is, in some ways, an answer to the question that's burning on their minds, which is, how do I build a successful business out of this? Now, as you mentioned, I've been an artist now. I've been an artist for close to 20 years. I started this a long time ago. I'm not one of the artists or business people that just throws a ton of money at stuff, because I started literally with nothing, like so many people do. but I learned, all of the fundamental skills: how to market, how to talk, how to sell, how to speak, how to present yourself, how to stand out, how to be different. And that's
Hmm.
what I teach artists, specifically. They call me the coach to the creative mind. I love that title. It's a
Mm.
very nice title because, again, it doesn't limit me. It means that I can coach all creative minds, which is brilliant.
Right, right.
But that's what I teach them. If I see them doing phenomenal artwork, which a lot of them can, I'm then looking for the core thing of, can you sell? And by selling, all it is basically telling people what it is that you do and showing them. It's like show and tell at school. It's that simple.
Hmm.
When you market your artwork, well, what is that? Again, it's been made into a multifaceted business. All that is telling people what you do. And that's
Yeah.
why when I teach, whether I'm teaching classes, which I don't do so much anymore, but certainly when I was, all teaching is standing up there and telling people what I'm doing. It's,
Hmm.
to me, it's not difficult. I put this brush on the canvas and I paint backwards and forwards, and before you know it, you got a pretty picture.
Well, if you tried that with me, it wouldn't work. I can't even paint a fish, okay? Leave alone a cat. So, but I do
I
get
hear
what
that
you're
a
saying.
lot.
Yeah, I do get what you're saying. And you just said coach to the creative mind.
Yeah,
Aren't we all born with a creative mind?
yeah.
So then you're a coach to everybody.
It's the simple answer. Now, the thing is, a lot of people would argue that they're not creative. To me, if you're not creative as a human being, you're dead. Because you look
Hmm.
around, whether it's a bin man, whether it's a politician, whether it's an artist, a speaker, a musician, whether it's what you're doing with your shows and coaching, whether it's a teacher, every single one of us has to be creative in some form to get to where we're at.
Right.
And it's amazing when people say to me, well, they're not creative, and they haven't got a creative bone in their body. And again, I've heard that from hundreds and hundreds of artists now that say, well, I could never do that. And I put a brush in their hand and I said, right, follow me. Here we go.
Hmm.
You put this on, you do this, this, and this, and you walk them through step by step how to do it. People, again, have gotten away from that core belief that they can do it. Why? Because they've been conditioned that they can't. And it's
Right.
almost like the rules of the game and the people that design the rules are designing the rules so other people can't win. So you got to figure out
Yeah.
the rules of the game for sure.
Right. Well, and then that has to do with labels, right? I mean, all the way, I always believe, and I know you and I, we share a passion for the youth in that
Yeah.
sense. We start out by grading people
Mhm.
according to a system that may fit some, but definitely don't fit all.
Correct.
It's like if you do it this way from line 8 to 20, then you're a 1 or an
Mhm.
A. If you do it differently, you're no longer an A.
And
But
that's been one of the biggest problems with our educational system,
yeah.
which was a video I covered at the end of last year, simply entitled or is your child failing the school system, or is
Hmm.
the school system failing the child?" And when you actually look into what they're teaching, why they're teaching, what is the fundamental goal of a child, it used to be, and I won't go on about this too long, but it used to be that a child would go to school to get a broad overview education so as they could go out into the workplace.
Right.
Now it's not that. Children are leaving not having a clue how to sell, how to market, how to get a job,
Right.
how to manage money, the fundamental skills. And the school
Hmm.
system has not, it's, in my opinion, becoming obsolete, like so many things. And I
Hmm.
think when that happens, we have to really challenge that, because otherwise you're going to ruin generations of people like the millennials. I was in an interview yesterday where one of the hosts was laughing about, and I didn't agree with this, by the way, folks. This does not bring, me up, but this, I quote, "Shall we all just take a minute to appreciate how miserable the millennials will be now because they can't get online?" Which I thought was a really cruel comment personally, but it did
Mm.
get my mind rolling, and I'm thinking, well, hang on a second. We all make our living from online stuff.
Right.
It affects us
Right.
just as much as it affects anybody else. But I thought,
Hmm.
millennials have not had to have the same struggle. The struggles are different now. You've more people
Yep.
struggling with anxiety and depression than ever before. I mean, you look at the statistics; it's insane. than they did in the
Mm-hmm.
1800s, 1700s. And I do believe it's because the rules of the game have changed for so many. And it's
Yeah.
because we've moved away from the core spiritual aspect, but also because the game is designed for people not to be able to win under those labels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I want to say sometime last year I wrote an article about the educational system, right?
Mhm.
And I pointed out that it is interesting right away in math, for example, and you'll be able to relate to this. In math, they tell you which one doesn't fit,
Yeah.
right? And what are you supposed to do with the one that doesn't fit? You're supposed to X it out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I suggested that instead of Xing it out, we should like make a heart around it,
Yeah.
because being different and not falling into one of those labels is
Mhm.
actually why you're here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it is. And that's, again, part of the problem is there is a world now that's conditioned. And you and I talked about this a little bit,
Mhm.
a few weeks ago when we were talking about the teenagers. You go into Instagram now, and all the girls are trying to be alike. They're all trying to get attention
Mhm. Mhm.
by, and they believe the only way to do that is to, dare I say, prostitute themselves with the
Yep.
photos that they put out there. The guys are doing the same, and it's like, this is the society that's being raised. And it's like, no wonder so many people are, depressed about the way they look about themselves,
Mhm.
younger and younger and getting pregnant. And there's so many issues that are there, as opposed to being taught, look, you have an amazing purpose and a being about you. Stop being conditioned by the school system that,
Mhm.
quite frankly, don't know the difference from head to tail. And, that they're putting these things out. And these, I can't be the only one that appears radical in these views. But I
No.
think until we get to a place where teenagers can learn for themselves and can be taught, to think and taught how to think, not necessarily brainwashed, but actually how
Right.
to use their brains, as
Yeah.
opposed to being taught, you need to go to school, you need to do this, this, and this to pass your grades, because if you don't, you won't get a good job, which is garbage. Because a lot of people pass their grades really, really good, well studied, and they still can't get a good job. The way
Right.
the game has changed, the way the game was played has changed. And until you
Mhm.
learn that, yeah, I can't say it enough. The Native Americans talk about this so, so clearly. And it's amazing, since 1800, that a lot of folks in the United States have been trying to eradicate them off the face of the
Yeah.
planet. And you're like, do you spot the correlation here? So,
Absolutely. It's funny because I used to teach a Native American history class. So it's like,
wow, that's incredible.
like, yeah. And, I'm not officially Native American,
Mhm.
but one thing that has happened throughout my life is I was always looking the odd one out. But, just like you, I had certain insights or certain connections, or maybe it was tolerance or something. And it is fascinating because Native Americans or indigenous peoples, they have so much more of a connection to the world around.
Correct. Yeah.
And if there is no internet now, which, with the magnetic storms, who knows?
Mhm.
Okay, who can really still live without it? I mean,
Yeah.
you and I maybe,
Mhm.
but we've gotten used to this stuff, even if it doesn't work 100%. But our kids,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just looking at my daughter, she and she doesn't use the phone or anything very often,
Mhm.
but it's just like that. She doesn't even
Yeah.
have to think about it. It's
That's
like,
not the problem.
wow, they're so used to it.
Mhm.
And the way that they do coding, I mean, they're still working in the brains, and yet I sometimes think that because we're doing everything behind the computer, there's always a mask, there's always something, right? Whether it's a green screen or whatever. But is that really who we are? And are we really still connecting with people? Or is that why we have so much depression?
You got it in one, with so much depression now. Now, I always ask people when I'm coaching them, do you have clinical depression, which means, it's your cellular structure, it's your chemical imbalance. And this is a very important question to ask. Do you have, chemical imbalance, or is it a feeling of depression? If it's a chemical thing, I can point you to a doctor, because that's what you need. Because it could be your serotonin levels that's too high, too low. If it's a feeling of depression, then that's something I can help. And one of the things that I apparently seem to specialize in these days is not it's not looking at the symptoms, but it's actually looking at the root cause. What's going on here? And too many people, including doctors, medical professionals, are missing the root cause. They're dealing with the symptoms. The symptoms are a result of the root cause. If somebody is not getting out into nature, and this is part of the reason that my wife and I plan on moving further north within the next 5 years, is because that connection with nature, it refuels your body, it refuels your mind. When people are going into winter and they're not getting enough sunlight, for example, it has a massive impact. Guess what? The other thing that has a massive impact is this. It's your phone. It's what you see, hear, the stuff that you're putting on, that you are taking in all of the time. And it is so vital that you learn how your mind works. Because when there's so many scientists now that are specializing in going to the moon and trying to fly to Jupiter and going beyond into the space, and they don't know a damn thing about working their bodies.
Yes.
And they don't know a damn thing as to why they feel anxious. Well, guess what? You weren't born with anxiety. It comes from your societal, your societal structure. It comes from what you put into your body through your mouth, but also what you put into through your mind. And
Yes.
I honestly believe now that, again, it's funny you brought this up, Natalie, because I was thinking about this morning, that the world seems to have been shaped more and more now around the internet. But here's the thing, the new currency, and I can see this far off. Robert Kiyosaki's talking about global crashes and all sorts of things that are going on right now. Robert Kiyosaki is a guy that I've, learned from and I have a lot of respect from. And I know a lot of people don't. That's fine. That's up to them. Doesn't matter to me either way. But one of the things that's really interesting is everything's being geared now to the internet. This one world currency, which will be Bitcoin, the one world currency on how you do business, the value of Bitcoin, all this, that, and the other. And I found it really interesting, because what happens if everything's now online? How you order food, how you eat, how you communicate, everything. You can't go over your houses because of, COVID lockdowns and all of this stuff. What happens if the internet goes down? What about if the internet had crashed for 6 months during lockdown? You couldn't access food, you couldn't access finance, you couldn't access anything. When we move away from what is source, I can't say this stuff. When we move away from what is source and what is, the vital stuff as what's happening, then you're actually putting yourself in a trap. And I think, again, there's a whole world of people that are being conditioned now that I genuinely have great concern for. And there will always be those people that rise up like you and I, that are going to stand and speak out, and that choose their own path. But for the majority, for the mass, they follow suit because it's the easy thing to do, and
right.
It's difficult. It was difficult when I was a youth worker. It's difficult now, in watching it. And that's part of the reason that I'm so joyful in shedding all the labels, because I don't have to answer to anybody that says, well, you shouldn't believe this, or you should believe this in this way, or you should believe what we believe. It's like, no, I shouldn't. I did that for you. It didn't benefit me.
No, and it's so funny because, like I said, rejecting labels, I'm all over it. And there is a label that I chose for myself. And it's funny how people interpret it.
Yes.
Because you have to sort of justify it. Like, what do you mean with revolutionary? Or what do you mean with mentor? Yeah. It's like, well, I don't know. What does it mean to you? But it's interesting how and that's why I choose some labels, how that gets people actually into a conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that is the important piece. I could not agree more with nature. One of the biggest things is that you have to go out. I mean, whether you just open the window sometimes if you live in a city, or you go out in the balcony, but you need to breathe in, you need to relax. And the funny thing about the internet is that I've met older people, older generations, who talk very badly about the internet and how all the younger generation is so addicted to it. And then I watch them, and they're like on their phones talking like WhatsApp and Signal and I don't know what else, and checking everything constantly. And I'm like, hold on a second. Didn't you just say that's not good? you know?
I mean, Natalie, just as a side thought to throw in there, when I was beginning business, many years ago, I was on the internet all the time. It was back at a time where Facebook didn't restrict anything.
Mhm.
You could literally promote left, right, and center, and I grew my business, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm now in a position again where I'm so thankful that if I want to take 3 or 4 days off the internet, all I do is click my phone to airplane mode. I don't miss it. We've now built a structure, and we're building obviously a structure with you guys where money flows in. Again, when you see money as the tool and not a must have, and it becomes obsessive, you'd be amazed how it flows. I just allow things to flow so much with peace now. And I know there'll be a lot of people watching this, so I'm going to speak to their concerns, if I may, just for a second, because my goodness, this guy sounds like a complete lunatic. He sounds like, he's been smoking the peace pipe on his way out there. Folks, let me tell you, nothing could be further from the truth. I have seen both sides of the coin, which is what makes my coaching unique. I have been the guy that came back from the United States where I met Natalie, that came back to, my best friend making me homeless. And, then having to live in sheltered accommodation, and how that changed my mind, and then abandonment by my church that I worked with, and then all manner of crazy things, and how to restart, how to grow, how to develop a business. I've been that guy that was so angry and furious for so many years that I was not pleasant to be around. And equally, I'm the guy that, the beginning of this year, for whatever reason, came in contact with Wayne Dyer's teaching, Everyday Wisdom. If you saw the show a couple of days ago, you'll know all about this. I spoke about it on Barry Shaw's show. I encountered Wayne Dyer's teaching. I listened to it for 2 hours. Out of that, I started to develop my own Everyday Wisdom, which should be released, I believe, the beginning of next month. And literally all the anger, all the bitterness, it just went. The next day, I started wanting to know more about psychology, how the brain works. I went through a psychology course with the University of Yale. That wasn't enough. I studied the psychology with MIT, which actually goes into how the brain works. Then the University of Stanford. Now I'm actually going for the degree because I studied it online and it wasn't, particularly, graded. But I studied so much, and it felt for the first time in my life like I was aware of being guided and pulled, and in a way like just no other. I encountered business partners. We built team life coaching. We reconnecting with Natalie. I've seen firsthand how what I'm saying really changes your life. And the people out there will still be skeptical, and that's okay. I'm not here to convince you. I'm just here to relay the information. I'm not here to be threatening or to try and, preach or anything like that. I'm just here to share my experience on what's gone on and what's happened. And when you get to that place where it's just all good, and, you're attached to nothing, but aware and open to everything. And I visualize myself almost standing in a river in Pitlochry in Scotland, where everything's just flowing to me, and I choose what I hold on to, and I choose what I accept, and I choose what I let go of. That was a side thought.
And I want to dig a little deeper there in a minute. But before we do that, we're going to take about a 30-second break, because you said a number of things that I just want to hone in just a second. So stay with us. We will be right back.
Hello and welcome to the Los Angeles Tribune. Since 1886, our name has been a part of the world of journalism. We have earned a reputation for being a publication that practices integrity, authenticity, and responsibility. For general inquiries, contact today. Thank you on behalf of the Los Angeles Tribune team.
All right. So, abundance and clinging to things.
Mm-hmm.
I have learned that, and I had that conversation with somebody last week. She was so funny because she said, well, I stand there and I say surrender, and I don't know what I'm surrendering to, and I just can't surrender. And it's just like, I'm like, no, you are like on the inside. If you surrender and you let go of all of the affliction of the outcome, you know, then things starts flowing. So you clearly had an interesting life there. Thanks for sharing. No, that's very important
That's
because
a short version. Yes.
yeah, I know, but some people think that, you know, we just landed here and everything was
Yeah.
peachy. And that's always my goal, to tell them, no, it's not. So when you're thinking about surrendering, what was the point in your life where you sort of surrendered and you said, you know what, I'm just going to let go, and then things are going to fall into place? Do you remember when that was or how that was?
See, the whole notion of surrendering to me brings my mind straight back to religious context. Because that's,
Oh,
yeah, it's what you taught frequently in the Christian church. You know, you must surrender to God, and you must send, you know, you must give up of yourself and take up thy cross and you know, and march forward. And everybody's got their own view. And again, I can speak to it. I studied theology for 20 years, folks. So I get it. I worked for the church for 15 of those years.
right.
For me, if I'm honest, I never had that concept of I'm surrendering, I'm giving up, I'm doing anything. All I was doing was being. And literally, to go to a spiritual, sense and whatnot. And if you're not fan of the spiritual folks, then you're not going to enjoy this. But it's the truth. At least it may give intrigue. It literally just felt any chains and shackles that I had of the bitterness that was holding on to me, and or that I was holding on to, and the anger that I was holding on to, it dropped off. It was never a case of I surrendered or anything like that. They all dropped off. It was like the scales dropped off, and I just walked forward. And that was it. And, I had a number of people, including family around me at the time, that was like, initially it was like, what on earth happened to you? But then when you drop the label of your faith and, and of other things. And again, I've never been one that's, again, sat under the labels very, very much. In the Catholic Church, when everyone had their head bowed, I was looking up to the 30-foot, statue of Jesus, and welcoming. I've always thought very differently to other people. And I think just for me at that point where I was like, you know what, if I want to study and I really want to seek after truth. I know we had a conversation about this the other night, Natalie, that, people seek after truth, but they seek after it in a limited way. So they seek after Christian truth or Hindu truth or whatever. For me, it was like, I'm happy to sit and learn under, an Indian mystic called Sadhguru. I'm happy to learn the story of the Buddha, which if you've never read it, you never heard about it, it is gorgeous, the story that's there. If you've never heard the story of no moccasins and, the eagle and the woman, from Native American spirituality, it is phenomenal. Yes, you can study all the fundamentals. For me, what it comes down to for my own personal journey is I very much believe, God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, love them dearly. Concrete over that, but what I seek as a person, that takes care of my eternal soul, if we're going down that road. But for me, what I want as a human being here on this planet is a seeker of wisdom, a seeker of not so much how can I be a better religious person, but just for me, how can I be better in myself? How much more can I learn? And it's not because I have to, it's because I want to. And something you said earlier on about labels, I think it's very different when we assign labels to ourselves. We've got to be careful of it. But when we assign labels to ourselves, I think it's different to other people assigning labels to us. And the reason I say we must be careful about it is because when we assign a label, it's always going to be met with a judgment one way or the other, no matter what you do. So it's very interesting indeed.
Absolutely. And I love how you're sharing your views on surrender, because the way that you describe what happened is actually the point of surrender to me, and which is in my point of view, it is you're surrendering everything that's society taught. You're saying, no, I'm letting go. That all doesn't apply to me. I'm a spiritual being, and whatever happens. I have no attachments to any of these things. I'm here to do what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
And so, the way that you're describing everything falling off, that makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is everything's in transition. We are constantly in transition, and that can be a hard thing for sure. Every person that comes into your life is here for a time and a season, and then they're going to move on. So, for example, your husband and wife, you love the time, and I struggled with this as well for a while, folks, especially writing my book, that it's almost like this conveyor belt of life that, you're with them for a time, you're with them for a season, and the same with your best friends and family and all that kind of stuff. But then eventually you've got to give them back, and all of life is a giving back. Everything it gives to you, it's also going to take from you. And I think in some ways that it keeps an awareness of who you truly are. And when people say to me, oh, it was so sad that so and so died in your family, and I don't look at it that way. I look at it as it was their time. And I look at it as there is no death. If you're an eternal spiritual being, there is no death. There's just a changing of worlds. And I think for me, that's just really where I'm at right now. And it's a wonderful place to be, where I don't need to hold on to anything. I just let it be. I'm very much aware how fickle money can be. I'm very much aware, that 50 years from now, I'm not going to be the same person then that I am now. I'm not going to be doing the same things, and that's okay. It's all a process. It's all a process for sure. And 200 years, 1,000 years from now, unless my books are going to be humongously successful, which is always the aim, the chances are we're not going to be remembered, which means that we are born for a time such as this to make an impact with the people that we encounter now, not in the future, not, thousands of years from now. There's only a handful of people that have done that. And that's okay. That's fine.
I love that, because I'm always the weird one when I talk about, the person just transitioned, and I use the term transition, because to me the soul is everlasting. It's like, yes, they're not here right now in that format, but you have memories, you have thoughts from them, and all of that. So the again, the letting go of what society has taught us, and a lot of that is, the idea of heaven and hell, which all of those opposing ideas I don't subscribe to at all. People have often heard me say I don't believe in bad and good in that sense. It just is. Somebody just does something, and we may be able to understand why. And the other thing that I have found is that when I talk about, like you said, some people are there for a time. They're there for a time, and then if you can close that book with love and really see, what have I taught them? What have they taught me? Oh, how wonderful. Maybe they're just no longer your friends. And then sometimes you reconnect, and it's time to learn again, because both parties evolved somehow, and so I'm not at all saying that it's good to, divorce 20 times, but there might be a reason why you need to divorce. Maybe you've learned your lesson. And I also believe that if you keep marrying the same type of person, you haven't learned anything. But it is interesting. And you talk about your book, and you of course have your website, which I put up a couple of times, The Battles We All Face. So what battles do we all face? And let me put in parentheses, because you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the internet and the quote by somebody that you don't agree with, that even though the newest generation, the millennials, are used to the internet, that they face their own battles. So what, in your point of view, are the consistencies in the battles that we face?
I think the battle that we all face is being human. I think for a lot of people, they struggle, especially if they don't realize who they are. And as we get older and more conditioned by the world, I think a lot of times, if people are not self-aware and they don't have mastery over themselves, then, they become less and less than what they were when they began, their journey. I think, a lot of people struggle with being human in this world. I think they struggle a lot of the time with, I suppose, what society indicates and dictates to them that they need to believe and they need to be. And as Jim Carrey referenced, he's got a wonderful spiritual teacher whose name escapes me, but he said, a lot of people end up depressed, and they're depressed because they're sick and tired of their bodies literally needs deep rest because they're sick and tired of putting up this false image and this false self of themselves. And I know for a number of years I did the same thing, and it was so exhausting having to pretend to the world that you were this way or you were that way or you believed in this, just to get public opinion, or when you say the prayer you want the big amen at the end and everyone to agree with you. And we all want to be, I think, accepted, because it's nice when we're accepted. It's nice when people love us and they say nice things about us. But I think when we need that, that's dangerous, because then you're willing to do some very, very crazy things. And I've seen this in this past year alone, where people were bored in their marriages, so they decided to leave their husband and 4 kids and go off and have an illicit affair. I've seen it with, and then they return back to the marriage expecting the problem to be solved, and they don't realize that the problem was not usually in the marriage. The problem was actually inside of them. I think the problem, the core problem, because it's a loaded question that Natalie had asked, about the battles we all face. I think it is being human. I think the biggest battle people are facing is their memory and their imagination, which gives birth to anxiety. Now, what is anxiety? Well, it's fear of the past or fear of the future. It's fear of what could be or what has been. I think that, the transitional stage where people are struggling to let go, I think they're ultimately struggling with how to find their core self. So they reach a point where they think it's their sexuality or it's, whatever it might be. And they get so far in their self-discovery and they say, well, I'm this way and that's who I am. And then, they quote the line from the song that says, baby, I was born this way. And it's like, you weren't. That's the thing. you don't realize it, but you have been conditioned to be that way. And knowing how people change in their mind and their DNA structure. I mean, one of the things I love doing is taking the physical aspect of a human being, but also the spiritual, and how they mirror up, because there is a correlation that's there. I can tell you now, if you listen to XYZ, if you watch XYZ, this is how you are going to be affected. Why? Because it's a thing we do in psychology that's called behavior projectionalism, where you can almost tell the future, by a person's activities and what they see, what they do, etc., and unless there's a pattern interrupt, then that person, you can predict whether they're going to be financially successful, whether they're going to be happy, whether they're going to marry, whether or not they're going to be screwed up mentally, based on their, previous experience, based on their diet, based on what they're surrounding themselves with, so on and so on and so on. But yeah, I think the battles everybody's facing is the battle of being human and moving away from their core to what they were never designed to be in the first place.
Awesome. And it's funny because, I always talk about the hidden power of patterns, the stuff that is back there that needs to come to the forefront, because that's usually the stuff that's holding us back, right? In the subconscious mind. So I couldn't agree more. Having researched and taught history for many, many years, they're like patterns. I was just watching something on TV with my daughter, I don't know, last week or something. And I was like, it was called the butterfly effect. And it's like, yes, some of that was accurate, others really wasn't. But you can sort of see, if 2 people are fighting over something, one gets upset, the other one gets upset, guess what's going to happen? It's like, you don't need to think about it that much. It's the way that we've been trained. You're trying to be the strong guy, so therefore you have to fight now. But the other thing that I find interesting, fear. It's one of my favorite subjects. And I actually have a book coming out on that one. But fear, and I think that's where you and I also connect on a level. To me, fear is the lack of self-confidence and self-love. And you said, because it's the battles we face is human, because we've lost who we are. And I always feel that the unknown is only scary if we don't trust that we can handle it.
Yeah.
Because I always think about the kids, right?
Yeah. But I think, a lack of confidence, just furthering that on, which is one of the top 5, I believe now, maybe the top 10, but certainly the top 5. issues that teenagers are facing, what is a lack of confidence? A lack of confidence to me means that you haven't acquired enough information to speak or to perform the task that is required of you. That is a lack of confidence, and for me, when, if someone asked me, for example, to stand up and give a lecture about maths, I wouldn't be confident in that because I don't know enough about it at this point. If someone asked me, as we say, I knew nothing of what we were going to talk about tonight, but I knew that all I needed to do was sit and just see, and listen and listen intelligently, and the answers come. It's that simple.
Interesting, because to me, self-confidence really is, I might not be confident to talk about math, but I'll be self-confident to go up on stage and say, I am the wrong person to talk about this.
I think self-confidence and confidence are two different things. Confidence in something, and then you've got self-confidence in yourself. So I can be self-confident that if you put me in front of an audience, of however many people, with a guitar or with my art or whatever it might be, I can go out there and rock the house and have a phenomenal show. It's what I know how to do because I've trained myself since I was 5 years old to do it. I know how to do it. But confidence, I think, then comes from, do I know all the lyrics to the song that I'm playing? Do I know how to paint this painting? And that's, to me, so it's I'm splitting hairs here probably, but
well, no, I think that's actually interesting because you could do it two ways. And for me, then the self-confidence is connected to self-love, which means knowledge of self and embracing all of your aspects. Like I used to say, I'm not good in math, but that isn't true. I can do math. I just don't like it. I don't like doing math. So somebody else is doing my accounting. I always say that, but it is, if I had to, I knew I could handle it.
Yeah.
So I know myself enough. I love myself enough that whatever happens, I'll be able to handle. I'll get a group of mathematicians laughing. I'm sure. I have no worries about that. I might even get them thinking about quantum physics and, how we got here and the different levels of the playing field. I mean,
quantum
whatever.
Physics is incredible.
Yeah, it is. And, while you were talking, last week I had on Marie Diamond, who blessed me with her presence. And we were talking about energy numbers. So I keep wondering what energy number you are. I have an idea, but I'm not sure. Because I know what I am. I know why I'm what I am. It makes perfect sense to me. But, I would love for you to find that out just for fun. Because, again, that's a label. But it's actually an interesting label because in my instance, I've already applied that to myself. Way before, like when I came out the womb, I was like, yay, that's me. My mom will tell you that. But we are just about at the end of the show, John. I know we covered a lot of stuff. I know it's kind of hard to wrap it up. For the last minute and a half, what today, because every day is a new day, what today would you love to share with the virtual audience today, tomorrow, and for the future? Stage is all yours.
I think one of the things that immediately comes to my mind when Natalie was talking about, self-talk and things, that she wasn't good at maths and things like that. I think we need to be very careful, and this is something that I teach on a lot with regards to the mind, of all about how we use the phrase I am. If you want further teaching on this, you can obviously get in touch with myself, or you can check out the I Am Discourses by Saint Germain, which is a phenomenal series of teachings. Wayne Dyer spoke about this among others. But I think, when people speak about themselves, they've been conditioned to speak about themselves in such negative connotations and such negative ways that it's no surprise to me why they feel miserable or why they hate themselves or why they feel lousy or they feel that they're not good enough. And what we need to be really aware of is only speaking that which we desire to be into our life. So, for example, I don't have a problem in telling you in a very, very humble way, but deep in myself, that I am a genius. I am love, I am care, I am peace, because those are all the things that either I exude or that I want to exude. Plus, it's reminding myself of who I am. I am a divine spiritual being having a temporary human experience here on earth. And I think, for regarding the battles we all face, I think if we can start with anything. It's very simple to be aware of the words that we're speaking about ourselves, how we're talking about ourselves, and ultimately the conversations that we have with ourselves. That's going to aid you in your self-mastery. You are abundantly blessed. I am abundantly blessed. I am, grateful for all of the blessings that come towards me, all of the experiences that I can learn from. And so on and so on and so on. And when you can really get that down and you catch yourself, when you're talking a little bit negative about yourself, then all of a sudden your world changes, because how you feel about yourself changes, because how you think about yourself changes. And it's a very simple thing. Between thinking, feeling, and action, it takes 0.009 of a second. And that's a whole nother conversation for another day. So that's what I'd want to encourage people with today.
0.9 seconds. That's not even the ping on my internet.
Literally from thought to action, it's faster than that. It's incredible.
Well, if you're able to act, of course, yes. I want to mention to everybody one more time that your website, of course, is thebattlesweallface.com. Okay. So if anything that intrigued you about John, and also, just a little teaser, stay tuned. I think there might be more in store for John and the LA Tribune. You never know what's going to happen, but, just keep a lookout. He's been on some of our shows, and you never know. And the last thing, I do want to give a quick shout out to Denise O'Malley, who is, of course, always one of our favorite viewers. And she's actually teaching a public speaking class tomorrow. That's also awesome. But she was, of course, referring to how do you get up on stage? Because you know yourself. Yeah. Thank you so much, John. I know people will reach out to you. I can't wait to talk to you again. And until then, have a wonderful day, everybody.